Hi, everybody. My name is Carl Darden, and I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for joining us today on Navy Sports Central. I'm your host, and this is the official podcast of the Navy Sports Nation, where we take a deeper dive into Navy sports. Last week was a little rough on the mids as the Army-Navy Star Series got underway. They suffered a couple of really tough setbacks in both men's golf and sprint football, so I'll give you a quick update on how those two contests went. Meanwhile, the football team looks to make it 2 in a row after a hard-fought win over North Texas. They are on the road to take on Charlotte University this weekend, a team that is much better than their current 1-4 record. And today, in our deep dive segment, we'll be talking about a sport where Navy owns 15 NCAA Championships, and we'll be joined by an awesome guest who will help us learn more about it. We will also have our question of the day and mid-watch segments, so please stay with us. All right, so glad to have you with us here today on Navy Sports Central. Whether this is your first visit or you're a regular listener, thanks for taking the time. I'm going to keep the sports update kind of short today because I want to get into the deep dive segment. The sport we'll be discussing has been on my list for a while. I just needed to track down a guest with the expertise to talk about the program, so you'll definitely want to stick around for that. Now, you all heard me say in the opening that the Mids got off to kind of a rocky start in the Army-Navy Star competition. The men's golf team looked to be in a pretty good spot after their 4-ball matches last week. They won all of them to take a 4-0 lead going into the singles matches on Saturday. That meant they needed to pull down 2 more points in the remaining 7 singles matches to earn the star. Unfortunately, they were only able to come up with 1.5. The match was tied 5.5 to 5.5 after those 7 singles matches were completed, and Army ended up taking the star in the playoff. So no doubt that stung quite a bit, but this is a very young team. In fact, I was surprised to learn that there are no seniors on a 10-man squad. It consists of 3 juniors, 4 sophomores, and 3 freshmen. So from here on, the men's golf team will be competing in a series of invitationals as they work their way towards the Patriot League Championships in April. By then, they'll be much more battle-tested, and hopefully they'll be able to get some measure of revenge against Army when the time comes. The sprint football team also came up short on the road against the Black Knights. This was your typical defensive battle. I mean, when these two teams get together, it is a very, very low-scoring game, and this year was no different. I mean, I think in terms of total yardage, there was only a difference of about 4 yards between the two. I think Army had 225 and Navy had 229, something like that. But it all came down to basically turnovers. Navy was driving down for what looked like it was going to be the go-ahead score, but unfortunately, Army came up with an interception, and they were able to score a touchdown with about 47 seconds left in the game. That pretty much did it. If the Mids win the rest of their games, they could wind up facing the Black Knights in the CSFL championship game, just like they have the last 2 years. And no doubt they'll be looking to fix what went wrong last week. I do want to end on a positive note, though, so I'll finish up by saying it was great to see the football team earn a hard-fought win over North Texas last week. The defense recorded a school record 8 sacks. One of those came courtesy of sophomore Raider Luke Paris. He forced a fumble that the Mids recovered and converted into a touchdown, and that gave them the cushion they needed to get the win. Finally, the men's rugby team took on Life University and won a very close game. Life is a private school in Marietta, Georgia, and they have an excellent program. In fact, the Mids had never beaten them in the years that they competed as a club team. But this time around, Sean McClaney came through with a try with Navy trailing 14-13 in the second half. The kick put them up 20-14, and the defense made that stand up for the rest of the game. So the Mids are now 6-0 in the fall with 5 games left, and that includes Air Force and Army. What I don't get is that Army is not designated as a star match, and I'm pretty sure they play again in the spring, but so far that's not a star match either. If it was, that would make it a total of 26 for the year, and right now that number is still standing at 25. So I guess I'm not sure what's going on there. All right, that's going to do it for our sports update. Stick around because our deep dive segment is next. Okay, we are back. And, when I started the Navy Sports Nation blog 3 years ago and followed that up with this podcast in 2021, one of my stated goals was to shine the spotlight on the sports at the Naval Academy that tend to fly under the radar. Those would be the ones besides football, basketball, baseball, and I would put lacrosse in there as well. So that's what we're going to do today. In the opening, I shared that the Naval Academy has won 15 national championships in this particular sport. Now, I'm not sure if any of you were trying to guess which sport it was when I said that, But if you came up with offshore sailing, you would be correct. To tell you the truth, you could fit what I know about this sport into a small shot glass and still have plenty of room for a generous amount of alcohol. So that's why I've got an awesome guest to help me out. He is my classmate from the class of '84, and he was a member of the offshore sailing team all 4 years. Following graduation, he joined the submarine force and later came back to Annapolis to teach mathematics and to lead the summer sailing program. And during that time, he played a pivotal role in developing the mid seamanship and leadership skills. So I'm very happy to welcome Warren Mazanec to the podcast. So Warren, I really appreciate you joining me today. One of the reasons I wanted to feature offshore sailing is because I don't know that much about it. So thanks for taking the time.
Oh, thank you, Carl. This is a great opportunity. And you're right. There aren't many people who know a lot about the offshore sailing team and the things that they've been able to accomplish. So I appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, no problem. So now sailing is not a sport that most mids are exposed to prior to arriving at the Naval Academy. Was that true in your case, or did you have sailing experience before getting there?
So there's formal sailing experience, and then there's, sort of youth knocking about in boats. And when I was a freshman in high school, my father moved us to Cape Cod, where he was the principal of a high school. And so I started sailing on the local ponds with sunfish and lasers, and met some sailing friends who belonged to the yacht club, and I'd go along as crew and race with them, and weekend races or some of the one designs. But at the Naval Academy, the offshore team is sort of, although it's a varsity sport, kind of a club level entry point, in that on the intercollegiate team, just like with football and baseball, there are blue chip recruits. There are, they do recruiting, they identify people. Most of the people who come to the Naval Academy and end up as, all-American skippers and crews come out of formal sailing programs at yacht clubs from, very early on, just like in swimming, where you start at, age 4 or 5 and you progress through the ranks. Sailing is very, very similar. In offshore sailing, it's usually people who raced with family or friends, have experience on the water. Maybe they were a sailing junior, but didn't quite reach the level to make the intercollegiate team, but want to continue their sailing. And so the offshore team is there. And in our day, it was made up of a fleet of the Navy 44-foot yawls, which were all the same design, and donated boats. So I started out, like I said, doing the club thing with families and friends on the Cape. The person that I was working for in high school owned a 90-foot schooner, and my sophomore year of high school, he asked if I would sail with him down to the islands to start the winter charter season, and they flew me home. I went down in the springtime, and I came back. So that was my first offshore experience. It happens that his brother was Dodge Morgan, the man who built American Promise and set the record for the first solo nonstop around the world sail.
Oh, wow.
And my junior year of high school, on our way down to the islands, we ran into Hurricane Lucille, ended up getting dismasted and spending several months in Marsh Harbor in the Bahamas doing refit and getting the boat ready. And then I came home, finished up my junior year, and came to the academy. And I was able to leverage that offshore experience into getting onto the offshore team.
Wow.
So that's how I got there.
Hey, nice having some time off in the Bahamas before you finish up schooling, I guess, huh?
Well, there was it was called the Calvert School back then, and there was no internet or anything. But they sent you off with a couple of boxes of materials, and you would do self-study. Somebody would proctor the exams for you, put them in an envelope and mail them in. That's how you got your grades. Looking back on it, for increasing the odds to get into a service academy, that was probably not a smart move, but it was a lifetime experience. So, my parents were on board, and I took advantage of it.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. So it sounds like, obviously you had a little bit of offshore experience before going in, and that's really what kind of appealed to you about it. Let's talk a little bit about the types of boats that are used. You mentioned the 44-foot yawls. And by the way, the last time I was on a Naval Academy yawl was the end of plebe summer. But I'm curious to know, the different types of categories that you guys competed in when you were offshore sailing?
So there's two basic kinds of fleets, and one is a one design fleet. So there are several thousand J-24s and J-105s, and Pearson Flyers, and so they have a fleet organization. They maintain rigorous specifications. So technically, when everybody goes on the water, they're sailing an identically performing boat. And then it becomes really easy. The first one across the finish line wins. The other kind is when there is a rule, a design rule, like the 12-meter rule. When you do all the calculations for sail area, draft, and all the thousands of things that go into the design, the answer has to equal 12 meters.
Mm-hmm.
And so the box can look like anything you want it to look like. The goal is to make the fastest boat for specific conditions, and it equals the rule. And so there are rating rules. So you can race with a variety of boats, and the attempt is to give them a rating so that like a golf handicap. At the end of the day, if you have a 25 handicap, then you get 25 bonus points. If you're golfing against somebody who's a 5 handicapper, you get 20 more points towards leveling the field than he does.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like how the rating systems work. There are two objectives too. You spend both in both sets. You can spend a lot of money, but to make the sport competitive and affordable to the average people who want to race sailboats, one design sailing is very appealing, because typically your local fleet will, one year everybody will buy a mainsail, and they'll do a group buy, and the price will be good, and then everybody sails with the same set of sails, and they rotate through, and so better sailors typically end up on top, but it allows average sailors to go out and have fun and be marginally competitive. And then in intercollegiate, they're much smaller boats, typically 2 or 3 person crews. Sometimes they're singles, and all the boats are identical, all the sails are identical, and again, it's whoever is fastest around the course wins, and there's no calculating different boats against each other.
Right. Okay. So I was wondering if you kind of, on a standard offshore sailing crew, I was wondering if you could just kind of run down, first of all, how many people are in it, and then secondly, just a real quick thumbnail sketch on their positions and responsibilities.
Certainly. So as you would imagine, it depends upon the size of the boat. Some of the very large, 80-footers go offshore with 20, 22 people, and there just seems to be, bodies everywhere. On the Navy 44, which is the modern version of the Navy yawl, typically 10 people. Mm-hmm. So there will be 2 safety coaches, 1 for each watch section. There'll be 2 upper class firsties as sort of watch captains. Maybe they're second class. And then there will be 3 plebe, youngster, second class that round out that watch section's crew. And so, you have 5 on, 5 off, except maybe in bad weather, you need to do a sail change. You need all hands. But typically it's a port and starboard kind of a watch arrangement when you're racing offshore. When we're racing on the Chesapeake Bay and it's a full day, 6-hour race, all hands are on deck the full time. And so you need people to grind winches, trim the head sail,
mm-hmm.
Work the foredeck for sail changes, trim the mainsail. And I'm going in from, and I don't want to say least importance, but from the low skill to the higher skill jobs.
Right.
So you kind of start as a plebe, grinding the winch, watching how everything goes in the boat. You transition to trimming the headsail, which is you get a lot of advice and help from everybody in doing that. But you're on the low side of the boat. Your feet are always wet. So, that's where, your second step is in the trenches. Mm-hmm. The skill positions are working the foredeck, which is sail changes, jibing the spinnaker, pulling the lines, the strings. So raising and lowering sails, dipping the spinnaker pole for a jibe, making sure that all lines are running free so that you can execute any evolution without worrying about getting your gear tangled. And then mainsail trim is probably like the senior technical position. he works very closely with the helmsman to balance the boat, keep everything going in the right direction. And then you have a helmsman, which is typically the skipper, and a tactician, somebody to keep the big picture, like CIC on a ship, of what's going on and advising the skipper where to drive the boat so that we can be most efficient to getting to the line first.
Right. Okay. Very cool. So now let's get into a typical practice day. I was wondering if you could kind of describe some of the key maneuvers that are just absolutely critical to be able to, compete when you're out there to be successful in the regattas. So if you could run that down for me, that'd be great.
So there's two really scenarios that we practice with the offshore team, and one of them is when we're all sailing the Navy 44s, so it's a one design, and a practice race. So you get to practice tactics against people. You race on a shortened race course, which forces you to tack more efficiently. When you're going downwind, your jibes have to be crisp and fast. And so the windward, going to the windward leg mark, and then back down to the leeward mark is a shortened distance in practice. So it's very, very fast paced.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, you'll start out early in the season and you'll be doing drills, reefing and unreefing the mainsail, practicing your man overboard drill. Everybody on the crew has to be able to assume just about any position on the boat during a man overboard drill, especially in bad weather when it happens, very challenging, very easy to lose a crew. So that's something that not only do they practice extensively, but work really hard on standard language so that, everybody, when something like this happens, everybody uses the same terminology, the same commands, and every member of the crew is fluent in a number of the critical positions so that the first one on the scene can take that spot and make sure that it's a successful recovery. So like we'll do upwind sailing and we'll go all the way out into the bay, and rather than tack and sit on that tack for a long time, you will tack, get the trim down, get the boat speed up, get the boat speed where it wants to be, and then you'll tack over. And you'll do this, 100 times during practice.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets you to be crisp, trains the helmsman how to smoothly come about without losing too much speed. It teaches the sail trimmers how to work with the boat as it comes up into speed and adjust the sail trim so that you get back to your maximum speed as quickly as possible. And when you get to the other end, you turn around, you come back, you put up your spinnaker, and you jibe from side to side over and over and over again. As soon as the sails are set and drawing properly, you execute the next one. And it's just it's a repetitive thing so that it becomes muscle memory. Everybody gets familiar with, I have to ease this line 4 feet, and it becomes, rather than hanging it out carefully, you know exactly where it is, and boom, you can get the topping lift and the pole through the fore triangle as quickly as possible without any mix-ups. So there's a lot of drills like that happen, tacking and jibing. And then, of course, then you get to practice against your teammates,
right?
Which is great.
Okay. All right. So I noted, just kind of skimming through the Navy Sports webpage and everything, the offshore sailing team, first of all, it doesn't appear that they have much of an off season at all. There looks like they're racing year round. And secondly, they did compete in the race around Long Island a couple of months ago and did pretty well. Aside from those open water races where you're going like either around a geographic landmark or you're doing like point to point, like from Bermuda to, I don't know, New York or something like that, what might a typical course setup look like? I mean, is it an out and back sort of thing, or does it vary?
So setting up a race course and having a good race committee is really is critical. When we were in college, the typical race course was a triangle race course. And there was a windward, going straight up wind leg, a straight down wind leg, and then there were a couple of reaching legs. And the reaching legs was really hard to, it's based on boat speed. So the faster the boat, you stay on one tack the whole time, and you kind of race down, you flip over, you do the same fast reach back, and they felt that was less competitive. So today's race courses are called windward lewards.
Mm-hmm.
And so the goal is to have the starting line perpendicular to the wind, and the windward mark is directly upwind. So there should technically be no advantage to going to the right or the left when you start in the perfect world.
Mm-hmm.
And in the real world, paying attention to your environment, knowing where the winds are coming from, where they're likely to shift, will lead you to choosing one side of the course over the other because it should be more advantageous. You get to the windward mark, you turn around, you put up your spinnaker, and as you come back, instead of having one mark, they have two that is called a gate. And so you get to choose when you go through the gate, whether you go to the right or the left. And sometimes one side's more favored than the other, but it also is more crowded with other boats. You may choose to go to the least crowded side because you'll have an easier time getting around and back up to speed. And so typically in that kind of a race environment, 3 to 5 races a day, depending upon the size of the boat and the length of the course. And, if it's a 2 or 3 day event, you can have anywhere up to 12 races with 1 or 2 throwouts. So if you have a bad race, you get to toss out your worst score.
All right. And one of the things that you had mentioned actually before we started was the impact of weather on one of the trips that you were taking when you were in high school. So my question is, obviously you don't race in even tropical storm conditions or anything like that, but I was wondering what the basic limitations are in terms of weather, and what was the worst weather you ever raced in?
It depends on the event and the type of boat. In a typical like J24, it's 24-foot sloop. It's a one design class, or the Soling, which was the Olympic 3-man sloop. When you got to 15 knots of breeze, it was getting towards the upper end. If it got consistently above 20, they would typically postpone racing until the wind came down. But when you're talking like larger offshore boats, we won when I was back at the Academy as an instructor. We won the Annapolis Newport race on American Promise.
Mm-hmm.
It was a solid gale force winds the entire way from the moment we left the Chesapeake till we pulled into Newport, Rhode Island. But I was on American Promise, a very heavy, sturdy 60-foot boat. It was designed to sail in extreme weather, and we were able to carry a lot of sail and just plow our way through the waves, and that was what the boat was built for. The other large boats that were in the race were sporty, so they were built a lot lighter. Their gear was not designed for all the extreme weather, and so the boats that probably should have won the race, most of them ended up retiring because of the weather.
Mm-hmm.
But because it was an offshore race, that's part of the that's part of the package. So we continued to compete, and I had a great team of mids with me, and it was really awesome going across the finish line in Castle Rock and Narragansett Bay, and hearing the gun go off, and like, who's that for? Oh, is that for us? we had no idea we had done that well.
Wow.
So in the Chesapeake or in any other like weekend type regatta, once the winds start getting above 25 or 30 miles an hour, certain classes, certain fleets will postpone their racing. Larger boats will continue racing, and at just some point it becomes unsafe, either because of lightning and squalls or just danger to crew and equipment. And that's pretty much it. It's all up to the race committee. And, having an excellent race committee is important because they understand the limitations of the boats. And so they will keep you racing right up until that ragged edge of, are we safe or not? And they know when to call the race and when to tell you to continue. So they bring a large safety aspect. I've also been in races where skippers have said, well, it's just getting a little too rough out here. I don't want to get anybody hurt. I think we're going to go in, and we just, retire from the race.
Right.
And so it's an individual decision.
Okay. All right. So now, specific to the Naval Academy program, one thing I learned just in researching this was that the Kennedy Cup is recognized as the national championship for collegiate offshore sailing. And what I didn't know was that the Naval Academy has won that 15 times, including back-to-back years when we were there in 81 and 82. So I was wondering what recollection you have of those 2 years, and that's obviously when we were, plebes and sophomores and youngsters. What do you recollect from either one of those two races? I didn't know if you happened to be part of the crew or anything like that, but I'd be curious to get your take on those.
So when we were midshipmen, I'm going to guess we had about 10 boats in the offshore team. It was basically everybody who wanted to sail was given the opportunity. And during the fall season, it was the Macmillan Cup, which was sort of like the East Coast Championships, sailed on our Navy 44s. And it was against other colleges on the East Coast.
Right.
And we would, it was an opportunity to choose teams, and it was usually by class. And so there was a bunch of 84s, Chris Kramer, Dan Crisp.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to forget people like John Stamos, Robin Myers. And we formed a team, probably not our fall of our freshman year, but maybe for the Kennedy Cup in the spring of freshman year, plebe year. And we competed. No, we didn't do so well because we were fairly new, but that sort of nucleus stayed together. And in the fall of our youngster year, we competed for Macmillan Cup. And there's 4, 5, 6 boats that are competing. And it's a competition, and the boat that wins the competition gets to represent Navy in the Kennedy Cup and Macmillan Cup. And what was really exciting about that was it also gave us a chance to compete against the intercollegiate team. And the intercollegiate team was racing laser single-person boats, 420s, two-person boats, and they did some 3-person sloop racing. So they were not part of a larger crew that routinely sailed big boats. But because they were excellent at the tactics, excellent at sail trim, and the fast pace of dinghy sailing, 50% of the time they would have the winning team, and 50% of the time we would have the winning team. And it was sort of a pride thing. So I competed in Kennedy Cup spring of second class year, and I did Macmillan Cup fall of second class year and fall of first class year. And that was one of the 2 ways you could earn your varsity letter. And one was sailing in either of those 2 regattas, and the other was skippering a boat.
Okay. All right, cool. Now, after graduation, you still remained involved with the program at some point. I think I recall you talking about it was the summer sailing program or something like that. I was wondering if you could kind of run that down for us. What were some of the things, what were some of your responsibilities, and how did that program run?
So when I finished my department head tour on a submarine, I had the opportunity to come back and do my payback tour for grad school. So I was in the math department, and I had the opportunity to choose between doing summer YP cruise or the sailing cruise. So obviously I chose the sailing cruise. And it was a great way to get back into working with the midshipmen, small unit leadership, opportunity for them to take on responsibilities. As I would tell them on the way up to New England, your job is to put me out of one so that when we come back, I can sit on the fantail and just watch. And they almost always rose to the occasion. And it was really incredible to watch the maturation process and how they went from, not really knowing how to sail to being fairly competent on a boat. So I did that during the 3 years that I taught in the math department, and I was active in the training aspect of it. The Sailing Center asked me if I would consider going to take a U.S. sailing instructor trainer course for keel boats, and I did, and I became I think I was the first naval officer to be an instructor trainer for U.S. sailing, and so I would run certification clinics for sailing instructors. And I did that because I thought it was important to bring back a national standard in sail training to try to help incorporate into our curriculum. When I was approaching the end of my time in the math department, I was starting to look at where I was going to go next. And the director of ProDev, reached out to me and asked me would I consider going over to the Sailing Center to run the summer sail training program. And at the time, the billet was located in Loose Hall, and you can't do a PCS move from within your same command. So they moved the billet for the sailing center, for the sailing position over to the naval station the same week that Bupers moved to Millington, Tennessee. So the computer that controlled where the billets were assigned sat in a box for 5 years, or for 3 years. And when they finally got it set up and changed my billet, they cut my orders from the date of the billet change, not when I started the job. So I ended up at the sailing center for a little over 5 years running sail training. So it was great. I got to participate in the winter training cycle to make sure that our coaches and our first class midshipmen were properly trained. They understood the responsibilities of being, watch captain and safety coach. Come springtime, midshipmen who had chosen to go on the summer sail cruise, we could get them out and start the training process. And then, it was a 3-week cycle. They come in, they do chart preps, they do, they're given money, so they have to do meal planning and go buy their food. They get it all stored. They sail during the day to get up to speed. And then on the second week, they leave Santee Basin, head down the Chesapeake or up the Chesapeake, and go to New England and get to Newport and spend the weekend, and then turn around and sail back and turn the boat over for the next group to go. And it was really a fabulous process. I was there long enough that when I was in the math department, I had a young plebe. He was a tall, gangly kid, uncoordinated, very shy. And you go, oh my God, this is the future of our Navy. Well, when I was at the sailing center, we had a President's Circle Day for the alumni, and I got asked to make half a dozen boats available to take out these President's Circle donors and do a harbor tour. And so this kid Ben, he was a firstie at the time, and he had volunteered. And I got everybody on their boats, and then I said, I'll just go out with this one, and I got on Ben's boat, and he had not only participated in youngster sailing crews, but he was part of the sail training program, and he had completed his first class cruise as a watch captain, and got his skipper qual. And it was remarkable, the change in what I had seen from when I first met him as a plebe to being a poised young man who was in charge, proper safety brief. There was not a moment during the hour and a half underway that I felt, I needed to step in. He was just fabulous. And that is typical of what happens when a young midshipman gets involved with the sailing program early on and the maturation process through his 4 years at the academy. And then you turn out these really fine young men. And my time at the academy continued long beyond my sailing program experience. I went back across the river to Pro Dev, and I got to watch this young man come back as a lieutenant. And I was even more amazed at how just remarkable an individual this was, and that I had some part in the process of getting him to being the person that he was. And so that's, I think, for the sailing program, that's one of those lifetime opportunities, and the midshipmen that sees it really do well. There was a boat when we were there. It was Patriot. It was a Ferris 46, a black hulled boat. And I believe in the time I was a midshipman, there were 4 admirals that came off of that one boat.
Wow.
So it's one of those experiences that give you a great sense of seaman's eye, appreciation for the weather, the challenge of maneuvering boats, especially in crowded harbors. So when you take a sailboat and you go onto a starting line with 40 or 50 other large sailboats, you don't have a CIC team behind you doing radar plotting and telling you CPAs. It's all seaman's eye, and it's something that you get to develop over the course of your maturation process on the team. And so I found that when I got to my first submarine, when we were entering and exiting port, I was chosen over the department heads to be the officer of the deck, because my experience of driving large sailboats onto a crowded starting line, I was able I think it gave me the ability to see the other traffic for what it was and drive the ship proactively in a safe course rather than waiting for the nav plot and CIC to tell me where to go.
Right.
So,
right.
And for the same reason, we had so many successful pilots come out of the sailing team. On a ship, and you're doing 20 or 30 knots, your event horizon is fairly long. And when you're flying around at I don't know what they fly around at 500 or 600 miles an hour, your event horizon is much shorter. And I think that ability of seeing the situation, making an instant analysis, and choosing a correct course leads to being a better pilot as well.
All right. Good. I'll tell you what, we're going to take a short break. But first, I wanted to let you all know that you can stay totally up to speed on what's going on with Navy sports by joining our group Facebook page and by following this podcast. I'll put a link in the show notes to get you to our Navy Sports Nation group page. And following the show is even easier. All you've got to do is tap the follow button, whether you're listening to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, it doesn't matter. This will automatically drop the most recent episode into your library as soon as it's released, and you can listen to it whenever you're ready. It is definitely the easiest way to show your support for Navy Sports Central and the fastest way to grow the Navy Sports Nation community. So go ahead and hit that follow button right now. We'll be right back. All right. Thanks again for joining us on Navy Sports Central. Carl Darden here with you. And today we are talking about the Navy Offshore Sailing Program with my guest, Warren Mazanec, who also happens to be my classmate. Warren, we'll get back to our conversation in a minute, but first I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about anything you'd like to share with our listeners that's important to you. Maybe it's work-related, but it doesn't have to be. So go ahead and take it away. The mic is yours.
So what I'd like to do is just give a shout out to the offshore program at the Naval Academy. It was very formative for me as a young person. It gave me the opportunity to take on responsibility, be competitive, learn what it means to be a great team. And when I was able to come back and participate as one of the leadership in the Sailing Center, I got to see a whole different aspect of the dedication and the love for the sport that an entire host of volunteers and staff brought to the table every day. The offshore team has been very lucky to have John Tahansky as their leader. I'm thinking it's going close to 20 years. I knew John long before he took this job, and he ran J-World in Annapolis. He was always a pillar of the sailing community. He went out of his way to make sure that, and this is long before the Naval Academy, he always did the right thing because it was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And so when he came on board to be the head coach of the offshore team, he brought that philosophy with him that meshes perfectly with, what we are trying to teach our midshipmen. So, but there's a maintenance staff that takes time to teach the midshipmen on engine maintenance and sail care and how to repair winches, to the coaches who volunteer hundreds of hours of their time to make sure that the midshipmen have ample opportunity to get on the water and do things in a safe fashion. And, you get to meet other members of the sailing community and put their years of great experience to personal use. And so, like I said, it's such a wonderful family that, I'll be forever indebted to the opportunities that they provided me. And I hope that they continue for the future midshipmen. Yeah. There's the Navy in general, the flavor has changed. A lot of the fun out of what we do has been regulated out of existence. And this is one of those opportunities, to sell a young person on, wind in your hair, cup of coffee on the bridge, watching the sunrise in the middle of the ocean.
Mhm.
And it's that kind of, I love this, that makes you a better sailor, a better person, a better naval officer. And so, like I said, I'm incredibly indebted to all the phenomenal people who over the years have been giving their time to make sure that midshipmen like me had an opportunity to grow with unlimited potential.
All right. All right. I don't know that I could have said that any better, Warren. So I really appreciate that thought. All right, so let's go ahead and get back to our conversation. Now, along with the rifle team, both sailing programs were co-ed. Was that the case back then?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Leap year, one of my skippers was Kay Heyer. She went on to be an astronaut. And even as a midshipman, she had that leadership it. The person walks in the room and they don't really have to do anything, but you just get the sense that they're competent and in charge. And that was Kay. And I got the opportunity to sail for her. And despite all the garbage that she caught for being a female, she was just remarkable. And I walked away thinking, well, here's a woman who I'd follow anywhere because she's a great leader. And that helped, frame my start of my naval career, because you could have easily ended up in a company where very anti-woman and, being a plebe and trying to stay under the radar, you would buy into that vibe. And we didn't have that in 16th Company. So
Right.
I just thought it was amazing.
Yeah. Well, wow. That's a great story, Warren. Thanks for sharing it. So now let's talk a little bit about just professional racing, I guess is the best way to put it. I remember when the America's Cup was a really big deal. And in fact, when we were at the Academy, I think when they raced in 83, 80, at least I think it was in 83, either in the fall of 83 or in the spring of 84, Dennis Connor's boat lost to a boat from Australia, which I guess was kind of renowned because it had a really innovative design of their keel. It was a winged keel. And then he won it back 4 years later when they raced out there in Western Australia. I don't hear as much about the America's Cup now, and I try to kind of stay dialed into most sports, but usually you hear that coming up on the radar every 3 to 4 years. Haven't heard that much lately. Is there a reason for that, or do you get the same feel? Or is that just me?
So when we were midshipmen and the America's Cup was going on, they were racing a 12-meter design. And, we take into a bunch of factors. You do the math, and the answer is 12 meters. So, you can define the box any way you want as long as the answer equal 12 meters. And it was a traditional monohull. And so that was something that a lot of people could relate to. In the ensuing years, they have changed the design to make it a lot more exciting. Today, they're sailing these 70-foot catamarans that are on hydrofoils, and crew members are wearing body armor and crash helmets because they're running around at 50 miles an hour, and if the boat starts to cartwheel, you have to be protected because it could be. And my personal opinion is that's a kind of sailing that, although it's really exciting, I have a hard time relating to. Right. And in Europe and other places, they have sailing venues that are very conducive to being a spectator sport. And so they're harbors that, when you see on TV, when they show the videos of the races, there's thousands of people that are there to watch the racing happen right in front of them. And I don't think that there are that many opportunities or venues here in the United States to do that kind of sailing, to get a crowd together and generate that sort of excitement. Okay. So, I think it has evolved. They've been trying to keep the sport relevant, try to encourage technology. And I think for a certain segment of the sailing population, that the America's Cup type racing has left us kind of behind.
To your point about just the differences in the design, I remember within 2 years after Dennis Conner won the America's Cup back, and he did that in '87, there was another. I guess these countries can just put challenges out there anytime they want to. And that was the first time I started to see differences in boat design, because the next time I saw it was a challenge race, it looked like the Australians were sailing in a standard, 12-meter boat. I'm sure there's some other modifications made to it to come out to satisfy the rules as you stated. But the American entry was, like you were saying, this monstrous catamaran. I'm thinking, wait, how in the world did they get that to go through, to get it approved? And secondly, the Australians don't stand a chance with that kind of just looked like a complete mismatch. So was that the first time that you started seeing that?
With the Australians and their winged keel, they sort of opened the box to, out of the box thinking. So this was a new way of looking at stability and speed. And I think somebody took a step back and said, well, why are we limiting ourselves to one hull when we can have two? Can we work within the design rules? And again, that's probably about the point that many, I don't say, traditionalists, but many of us that sailed and race boats sort of lost interest because it was more of a spectacle than a competition.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. All right. So now let's have what I hope is a little bit of fun, and let's talk movies. I know that typically, whatever profession you happen to be in, and if there's a movie that comes out that kind of either reflects what you do for a living or what a passionate hobby of yours is, that sort of thing, you always watch it with a really critical eye. I mean, I do the same thing anytime I see movies that involve helicopters, for sure. So in 92, they came out with a movie called Wind, and it starred Matthew Modine and Jennifer Grey. And it was about the America's Cup races. I happened to watch it. Knowing what I know about sailing, it was fairly entertaining to me. But from your perspective, first of all, did you see it? And secondly, what was your take on it?
So yes, I saw it. I really liked. So whether it's a movie about helicopters or submarines or racing sailboats, you can approach it in one of two ways. I mean, you could go at it and pick apart all the things that aren't accurate, and it detracts from the overall movie. Or you can go into it and say, I understand that there's going to be, departure from reality, but I'm going to enjoy this for the story that it's supposed to be.
Right.
And the storyline was pretty cool. It is pretty typical of a lot of us. I believe that she came from, a well-heeled family, grew up in the yacht club environment. Matthew Modine, I guess, kind of like my experience, moved somewhere where you could do sailing, sailed with friends, was a pickup crew, but never part of the Blue Blazer Club, and got really good. And, I think the competition scenes and the decision making that went into it closely parallels the way it happens. But what I think they underplayed was the investment. These are people who spend insane amounts of money to gain that technological advantage to win a race, and have the America's Cup, and the R&D dollars that go into it, and the exotic materials that go into the boat building, all that stuff. It seems improbable that a guy like Matthew Modine's character would be able to generate the capital necessary to mount a successful campaign. But it was supposed to be a happy ending story. It was. They won. So I think it casts the America's Cup and sailing in a good light. If there was somebody that was interested in sailboat racing and they hadn't quite made the leap, this was probably a good movie to encourage them to explore it a little bit more. So for being a good movie for entertainment, I thought it was fabulous.
Yeah, that was my take as well, and I was especially impressed with the way they filmed the sailing scenes, the racing scenes. I thought that really kind of pulled me into what was going on. Okay, it's funny here. You've got a pretty good knack for answering questions before I ask them, but I'm going to kind of combine these two together here. You've already talked a lot about some of the technical innovations and changes that have basically made the sport completely different than what we're accustomed to seeing, years ago. Now, the question I'll put to you is, based on that, and I'm going to put you in charge of yacht racing's governing body here for, just theoretically, what are a couple of changes that you would make that would kind of satisfy both sides of the equation in terms of just keeping things innovative, but not making it quite the spectacle as it is right now?
There's almost very little. I look back. I lived in Annapolis for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
While I was stationed at the academy, and then when I worked in the defense industry. And while I was with the academy, I became part of a race crew from out in town, people that I had known beforehand, and we ended up sailing for over 20 years together before I moved out to New Mexico and changed my water sports to snow sports.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the sailing scene is in a fairly healthy place right now. There are a lot of opportunities to participate in more entry-level one design sailboats, which help contain the cost. There is a community of learning and education associated with that class of boat. In most cases, they are very generous with their time and their advice and their expertise. I was very fortunate that I raced Stolings. It's a 3-man Olympic class sloop. My son was very active in racing those as well. He crewed for Stuart Walker, multiple Olympic competitor, world champion, and he was on the race course giving it his all into his 90s.
Wow.
Man was just a legend. And my son got to sail with him. And in the 2014, my son and I raced together in the World Championships up in Toronto. And, these are Olympic class competitors. And the parking lot was as collegial as anything I had ever seen. Oh, crap, I left my jib at home. Oh, here, I have a spare. You can use that.
Oh.
And the thought was, I don't want to go out there and win because somebody is at a disadvantage. I want to go out and win because I'm better.
Right.
There were crews whose combined age was 200, and there were crews who were young people. And that was sort of the spirit that you find in the one design classes that are the classics. You find that in Wednesday night racing in Annapolis Harbor or Newport, or pick a place that does Wednesday night racing. When business takes me out to San Diego, I really try hard to make sure I'm there for Wednesdays. I do Wednesday night sailing with Gerald David and his wife Ann,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a very welcoming, casual. Let's get out on the water and sail a course, and okay, we'll call it a race, but it's just an opportunity to take a break midweek and get out on the water. And I think that vibe is really alive and well. I think in terms of world-class competition, there are avenues for people to compete in the one design realm and Olympic class sailboats. Those are typically smaller. If you're that good and that's your passion, there are opportunities to go, Grand Prix and in another direction. And so I think, depending on your personality and your desires, there are multiple opportunities for you to pursue in whatever direction you need to go. I have sailed from club level to pro Grand Prix. And I ended up sailing with this particular crew, the Zeiberger crew, for 20 years because on a Wednesday evening, those are the people that I just wanted to hang out with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were good, we won, but it was a very collegial environment. Nobody yelled at anybody. We all did our best. It was a team effort, and I just like being around those people. I've been on other boats that were filled with very aggressive type A personalities, and there was yelling, and the tension was high, and although we won, it was not a pleasant experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to the point where I didn't feel like I needed to prove myself any longer. And I got to do what I really enjoyed.
Right.
And that conveyed to my children, who also raced sailboats. And when they had the opportunity, they'd say, "Hey, Dad, you want to go out sailing?" Which was really my goal, was to create something that we could do together as a family.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, my end game was to make this a family sport. And I think, we can do this for the next, God willing, 30 years. And I'll still have children who will say, "Hey, that was pretty cool, Dad. Can we go sailing again this summer?"
Right. Okay. Well, that sounds like a pretty good spot to stop, Warren. I really appreciate the insight. So thank you very much for joining me to talk about the Navy Offshore Sailing Program. It has definitely been a good learning experience for me.
Oh, no worries. No worries at all. If you have any other questions, send me an email. I'll answer them the best I can.
Okay, sounds good. Take care. All right, we are approaching the home stretch. We'll be back shortly with our question of the day and mid-watch segments. Okay, it is time to jump into our question of the day. But before I get to that, I did want to basically confirm something Warren said about what yacht racing is like these days, at least when it comes to the America's Cup. I happened to jump on one of the yachting websites recently, and I think it's probably one specific to the America's Cup. But I will tell you, I could not believe what I was seeing. I mean, Warren was right. You have these huge catamarans, these double hull boats that were just flying all over the place. I mean, just going these incredible rates of speed, just crazy death-defying angles. And I tell you what, there's no wonder they're wearing crash helmets and body armor, because you get thrown from one of those things, and believe me, you may not walk away from it. So anyway, I can see why some of the more traditional professional racers have kind of gotten away from that. But definitely something crazy to look at. All right, let's go ahead and get to our question of the day. And as usual, let's start with the one from our last episode. Remember, it had to do with Navy goalkeeper Maddie Gallagher, and here it is. Maddie Gallagher played a pivotal role in starting 9 of 10 games as a freshman for the Navy women's soccer team. Her goals against average during the season was a microscopic 0.80 per game. What was her save percentage during that same period? Was it A, 77%, B, 79%, C, 82%, or D, 84%? The most popular answer was D, 84%. There were 61% of you who selected that one. And then 38% of you chose C, which was 82%. Neither 77% nor 79% received any votes. And it turns out that the correct answer was D, 84%. So shout out to all my 84 classmates who jumped all over that answer. Way to go. It was really tough to get a shot past Gallagher that year. One of the things I've seen her do really well to this day is redirect the ball over the crossbar on a shot that's going kind of high. That takes some real athletic ability and some pretty good hops too. And, Gallagher is 5'7", so certainly not short, but not overly tall either, which tells you she's probably got a pretty good vertical. Now, these last 3 setbacks that the women's soccer team has suffered have derailed their regular season title aspirations, but if they can reverse course and win at least 2 of these last 3 league games, they can generate a little bit of momentum going into the Patriot League tournament, where basically anything can happen. Okay, now let's get to our question for this week's episode. I mentioned earlier that the Naval Academy has won the Kennedy Cup 15 times. That is basically Offshore Sailing's version of the NCAA Championship. Now, on how many occasions did the Mids win it in consecutive years? Was it A, just once, B, twice, C, 3 times, or D, 4 times? Go ahead and give that some thought and let me know what you come up with. I will have the question up on the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page by the end of the day, and you can respond there. Now we're going to close things out by checking in to see how our 2 athletes on the midwatch are doing. First, we've got Avery Miller, who is a senior from Phoenix, Arizona, and she is a setter for the volleyball team who at 6 feet can be used as a blocker and a hitter if necessary. I'm recording this segment on Friday evening, October 13th, and it occurred to me that Navy just finished playing American University, and I just happened to check the score. Navy came from 2-1 down to win 3-2. And Avery Miller had 47 of the Mids' 53 assists, and she also added 4 kills and 10 digs to go along with that. At her current rate, she's a deadlock to finish her career in the top 5 in both total assists and assists per set. This win ends a 3-match losing streak, And the mids are still in decent shape to get themselves in a position for a good seed at the Patriot League tournament, but they will have to win out the rest of their games. And they do have another shot against Army in the Star Match, which takes place on November the 11th. Okay, let's move on to the men. And here we're looking at freshman Kiefer Black from the water polo team. He is from San Diego, California, and currently leads the mids in both goals with 43 and assists with 37. And that gives him a total of 80 points. I did watch this guy play when the mids took on Air Force last month, and Black didn't score, but he had 3 really nice assists. And what's amazing to me is how high he is able to elevate himself when he takes a shot, makes a pass, or gets a steal. Remember, these guys aren't pushing off from the bottom of the pool, okay? It takes some serious leg strength and athleticism to propel your body halfway out of the water to make a play in water polo. And at 6'7", 220, Kiefer Black is just simply a beast. He's actually got a decent shot at a 100-point season. The team has 5 games left, plus the Mid-Atlantic Water Polo Association tournament. So all he needs is 4 or 5 points a game to get to 100. The mids are currently ranked 19th in the country, and I think it's fair to say that Black will definitely be one of the keys to their success as they finish up the regular season and try to qualify for the NCAA tournament. That's going to do it for this edition of Navy Sports Central. Thank you all so much for joining us. Now, if you like what you've heard, please be sure to hit that follow button wherever you get your podcasts, and remember to get the word to all the other Navy fans out there. Once again, I'd like to thank my fellow classmate Warren Mazanec for joining me today to talk about the Navy Offshore Sailing Program. I don't know about you guys, but I know way more about it now compared to before. Our question of the day continues to be a show favorite. You can get in on that by joining the Navy Sports Nation Group Facebook page and giving your answer to this week's question. I will pin it to the top so you don't miss it. And just a quick reminder, the views expressed on Navy Sports Central are my own and do not reflect those of the U.S. Naval Academy or Navy Athletics. By the way, the music used in Navy Sports Central comes to you courtesy of Audio Jungle. This is a great site for purchasing the rights to use the music from thousands of artists around the world, and those featured in the podcast will be credited in our show notes. Talk to you soon, everybody. Until next time, this is Carl Darden. Go Navy, beat Army.